Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Danny Castillo to defeat Paul Felder, and I'm here to preview UFC 306 Noche 2 Season of the Witch, Riyadh. Okay, opening up UFC 306, we have Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Aoriquileng. My prediction for this fight is Rosas Jr. wins, and I've got him winning by decision because I'm an idiot. But a finish certainly wouldn't surprise me at all. He's an incredibly dangerous fighter, and especially dominant fighter. Dominant to the point where I think even if he does win a decision, I'd envision him getting at least one 10-8 round. That's just his style. And of course, uh, 10-8 fighters have chances of getting finishes. I'd say he'd get a submission before a knockout or a TKO, but you can get TKOs on the ground as well from positions. So I think Raul Rosas Jr. has a lot of ways to win, but grappling dominance is going to need to be the story of the fight for him. The basis for the prediction being decision, I guess, is because even though Aoriquileng has been finished 4 times, there's also 7 losses of his in which he wasn't finished, which shows he can be the nail, and he's comfortable being the nail. And also, the 3 submission losses he has are all 7 years ago at a minimum, and they're to solid fighters. That doesn't completely explain away the losses, but it cuts him a little slack. And the one knockout loss was a little more recently against the Ayman Zahabi, but despite it being a recent knockout loss, he's still a 31-year-old fighter, Aoriquileng. I think he's in the prime of his fighting career, and he just happened to be knocked out recently. I don't think it's a big strike against his chin, and I certainly don't think it's that big of a problem here in this matchup against Raul Rosas Jr., even though he's landed some nice single strikes lately. But really, the wrestling is going to be the story of this fight. I do envision Raul Rosas Jr. winning that battle, and I also think if he was to slow down, if he was to feel himself slowing down, I think he would try to slow the fight down. I think he's learned lessons from that Christian Rodriguez fight, which was way back when he was 18 years old, back in 2023. But that's the one blemish on his record. It was, in the end, he did a lot in that fight where you could say, yeah, it was close, but he definitely lost it, and he lost the second half of that fight. Despite being dominant early, it was a clear-cut example of a young fighter being tamed by an older fighter. Now, Christian Rodriguez was older, more mature, 26 years old, but he didn't have that much more experience than Rosas. Aoriquileng is 31 years old, and he's got a wealth of experience, coming up on 40 fights. So, on that alone, the experience, plus the fact that Aoriquileng's won or lost every which way, he's been 5 rounds. We've seen him fight 3 hard rounds in the UFC, and not look bad down the stretch. I thought he won round 3 against Johnny Munoz. I think couldn't hurt to waste some money on Aoriquileng winning by decision. And that's what I'll do. I have to see what the props look like, but I'll waste money on Aoriquileng in one way or another. I think he would follow the blueprint of Christian Rodriguez and take over the fight in the same way if he was to win, which I don't think is going to happen, by the way. I can't emphasize that enough. I'm a moron, but so I waste money on underdogs like this. Not a lot. We're talking about $2.87, but I'd rather do that than putting $50 on a parlay with Raul Rosas Jr. and Yasmin Jaregui to win fucking $13 or whatever. So Aoriquileng by decision, I'd say would be, I can't say it's his only path to victory because Raul Rosas Jr. has only lost once, but I'd have to say it's his most likely path to victory. And I know with his experience alone, he's got some of the traits to make that happen potentially. But again, I think Raul Rosas Jr. is still coming off of that loss pretty fresh. He's only gotten a few wins since then, but it was recent, and I know it's in his mind every time he steps in the cage. And I think if he does start to slow down a little bit, he'll feel that and he'll secure top position and hold on for dear life like a smart fighter would. So Raul by decision is the pick. I have no confidence in decision. I have a lot more confidence in Rosas Jr. And I have to see what the props look like. Maybe, even a finish, which is not my pick, would be worth it. But I doubt it. I think the best prop for Rosas Jr. would probably be decision. And I don't think I'd play that anyway because I wouldn't have the confidence. So in general, I'm staying away from him. And Aoriquileng, I don't give him a big shot at all, but I'll definitely give him a small bet. So that's that. Next up, we have Joshua Van stepping up on very short notice to take on Edgar Chairez. My prediction is Joshua Van wins, and I've got him winning a decision. And I don't have a lot of confidence in that all for a few reasons. Number one, he's fighting Edgar Chairez. And even though it's not in Mexico, he's definitely the hometown guy because this is the Mexican independence show and whatever. Number two, Joshua Van was knocked unconscious on July 13th, I think, by Charles Johnson. And number three, he's taking the fight on short notice. Again, it's not everything, and I do think Joshua Van is an exceptional cardio fighter to begin with. He's been reliable, even though he's coming off a round 3 knockout, ironically. But I do think he's in better shape than most UFC fighters, but it's still a little bit of a wrinkle to this fight. It's something you have to consider. He is stepping up on very, very short notice here. So he's got a lot going against him, and physically he's given up like 7 inches of reach and a few inches of height, which should mitigate the striking disadvantage for Edgar Chairez, because I do think Joshua Van has better striking, and that's the basis for the prediction, to be honest. I think he's able to get inside that reach, and I think he's able to outpoint Edgar Chairez with his sharper striking. He's sharper, he's faster, and he's relentless. He's a guy that's been able to accelerate as his opponents get tired. Again, his last fight notwithstanding. But Edgar Chairez, he's got a record of 11-5. He's finished all 11 of his victories. He does have 4 wins by knockout, which isn't that crazy, but it's probably a higher percentage of knockouts than Charles Johnson had going into his last fight. But the knockouts, they come a while ago. The last one comes over a solid regional fighter, Ivan Flores Hernandez. But the guy was past his prime, coming off a long layoff and the rest of it. And before that, he was able to get 3 other knockouts. One with a spinning back kick, one with a body kick, and one with a flying knee. So he's not exactly Mr. One-Punch Knockout, but he's got special moves. He's also got a mean front kick. And I think if the chin is at all compromised and Joshua Van is making a mistake taking this fight on short notice, then knockout is as much at play as it was in the last fight against Charles Johnson, if not more so. So there is that, but I don't think he's going to knock out Joshua Van. I do think he's probably better on the ground. That could be a threat as well. Joshua Van has been submitted. His other loss was a submission to Devon Jackson, I believe his name is. But the guy was all over Joshua Van, dominating him, picking him up and slamming him. Van was able to take it, fend off some tight submissions, tough armbar and the rest of it. But then he succumbed to a rear naked choke at the end of round 2. Edgar Chairez, he's not that type of fighter, not the bully wrestler who's shaped like a bowling ball. It's more the opposite with him, but he's still a guy that's got a variety of submissions. He's definitely more comfortable off his back than most as well. He's gotten triangles and arm bars and the rest of it. I should mention that 2 times he's been finished have been submissions. He's got 5 losses, submitted twice. He was submitted by Jesus Santos Aguilar with that guillotine choke that we saw against Stuart Nickel a few weeks ago. Well, he got that same guillotine choke in the 25th minute of a 25-minute fight against Edgar Chairez. And that's his last loss by finish. And the one before that comes against this guy, Axel Exuna, by triangle choke in round two. Now, I have to mention his last loss is to Tatsuro Taira, who is a much better submission threat than both those guys, even though Jesus Santos Aguilar's guillotine is incredible. But Tatsuro Taira is the guy that beat him, and Tatsuro Taira wasn't able to submit Edgar Chairez, and Edgar Chairez was able to outlast and threaten Taira down the stretch, where he could have gotten him out of there. So it was a really good look for not only his submission defense, but all the other traits as well. But the biggest weakness of his, I should say, is his wrestling, Edgar Chairez. He can be taken down and controlled. That's how he lost his other two decision losses to Clayton Carpenter, who I don't know if he's still in the UFC or not, but Clayton Carpenter beat him on the Contender Series, really by outlasting him and getting on top of him in the second half of that fight at the end of rounds 2 and 3. When I thought Chairez was doing well early on. But his other loss as well to Alberto Trujillo was a loss to a guy that he had 5 inches on, but was able to out-wrestle him. Joshua Van has takedowns, but he's not exactly Mr. Wrestler. So I can say this is a potentially more favorable or not a nightmare matchup anyway for Edgar Chairez, where his biggest weakness might not be at play so much. But I still think on the feet, even though he's got a lot to offer, he's at a disadvantage against Joshua Van. I think Joshua Van is more technical. I think his strikes are sharper too. Edgar Chairez does bring the more wild shit. You know, again, he's got spinning back kicks, body kicks, flying knee knockouts. He's got great front kick. But I think Joshua Van is the cleaner striker. And if he's not in too bad a shape at all, I expect him to be, his traits to be there for him in this fight, where he generally gets better down the stretch. With Chairez, it's a mixed bag. He's never completely collapsed, but he's had mixed results down the stretch in his fights. Joshua Van, the only bad result really is that round 3 knockout loss. Every other round 3 of his, he's the better man, Joshua Van. Again, that's not a lock in this fight because he's stepping off the couch, but he's definitely in better shape than most guys coming off of their couches. So Joshua Van, by decision, is the pick. And there's not a lot of confidence in that. I'll wait for the odds to begin with and then the props, see if anything jumps out. But I have Joshua Van as a slight favorite to win this fight. Next up, we have Yasmin Jaregui taking on Ketlin Souza. My prediction for this fight is Yasmin Jaregui gets a round 2 stoppage, TKO. A decision would not surprise me at all, but Ketlin Souza has been finished in all 4 of her losses. 2 by knockout or TKO and 2 by submission. I've seen one of her knockout losses to Ariane Canalosi, who's back in the UFC. She's built like Chad Mendez, and she stabbed her in the body with a front kick in round 3. So not a bad loss. But the other loss happened in 80 seconds, and it's listed as a knockout to this girl, Diane Cardoso. I wasn't able to see it. Really would like to have seen what that looks like. But at the very least, I'm sure it's a strike against her overall durability. And her 2 other losses are by submission. She was armbarred in 2018 to this girl, Fabiolani Mello, and she was knee barred to Karine Silva, who's a beast, in round 1 last year with a, not a conventional knee bar, but she looked like she was just going to rip her leg off. So all 4 of her losses are by finish, and that's why I guess I'll go with Yasmin Jaregui getting a finish, but a decision wouldn't surprise me because despite these finish losses, she's fought hard for decision victories in her last 4 wins. Against some decent competition. Marnik Man in the UFC maybe being the worst. But still, that's a hard-earned UFC win. And before that, she picked up some hard-earned decisions in Invicta, the last of which was a championship fight, and the other one was a 3-round fight, but both over solid veterans, Christina Williams in the 5-rounder and Maiju Suitama in the 3-rounder, and Giselle Moreda in a 5-rounder before that. So my point is, harping on all these decisions, is saying they were competitive fights. She did not wilt. She did not look bad in the 5th round when she was there. And it seems like, despite all these finish losses, she's a girl that could be tough to get out of there. But I'm going with Yasmin Jaregui because I do think she's going to be leading the dance. I do envision her winning the points battle here against Ketlin Souza. Ketlin, I think, is going to be the slower fighter. That's as far as the speed of the strikes, the sharpness of the strikes, but also with the movement. I think Yasmin Jaregui moves better, and I think she's going to be winning this fight, playing the matador, and making Ketlin Souza look like a stupid bull. But I have to look at Yasmin Jaregui's record and say, hey, she's been knocked out in her one loss to Denise Gomes, and it was in 20 seconds. She was steamrolled, and that's not typically how women lose. I'm not saying it's going to be a big problem of hers moving forward, but I'm saying it remains to be seen. And of course, I have to mention she was dropped anyway, against Estela Nunes in their fight. And she was roughed up early before taking over and then really roughing up Estela and getting her out of there in round 2. Estela Nunes doesn't have the best cardio to begin with, but still, Yasmin Jaregui handled adversity well and shined in that fight in the end. She picked up 2 solid decisions over Yasmin Lucindo and Sam Hughes. Sam Hughes, she's an incredible 3rd-round fighter, maybe not the best 1st-round fighter, but Yasmin Jaregui is maybe the only girl to cleanly defeat her in round 3. Not that she finished her, but she outpointed her. And she didn't let Sam make that Sam Hughes comeback. Her last fight, Sam Hughes, was pretty close in round 3 as well, Victoria Dudakova. But still, Sam is typically the better fighter in round 3, and that was not the case against Yasmin Jaregui. She looked as sharp as she needed to be. And against Yasmin Lucindo, I actually thought she lost round 3 in that fight against Yasmin Lucindo, but still, Yasmin Lucindo is a very good fighter, and Yasmin Jaregui, I think, knew she had done enough to win that fight at that point. So, whatever. Maybe she took her foot off the gas a little bit. But regardless, I think Yasmin Jaregui, as in general, looked really good in the UFC. She's dealt with every bit of adversity very well, aside from the obvious 20-second loss there to Denise Gomes, where she was caught cold. And that is a possibility against Ketlin Souza. Ketlin Souza has power. I've compared her in the past to John Lineker. She may not have Lineker power, but she's definitely a little pit bull in there, and she's got above average power for sure. So Yasmin Jaregui's got to watch getting caught by the power of Ketlin Souza. But in general, I think Yasmin Jaregui has the better chance of getting the finish and the much better chance of winning a decision. And she is my pick to win this fight. So I'll take Yasmin Jaregui, but she's too big of a favorite for me to really bet on. She's approaching 5-1 odds. I don't know. It's a little too much for me. I'll wait and see if a prop jumps out to me, but in general, I'm staying away from this. Maybe I'll bet on Ketlin Souza as well. You know, she's a big underdog, and I would say her top path to victory is a TKO or a knockout. So maybe I'll waste a few pennies on that. But in general, this is one where I'm staying away from it, just like Raul Rosas Jr. Yeah, you know, these fights are fights where the favorites are too big, and there's just enough doubt to stop me. So I'll stay away from them. Next up, we have Ignacio Bahamondes taking on Manuel Torres. My prediction for this fight is Ignacio Bahamondes wins, and I'll go with him winning by round 3 stoppage or a decision or something. But the basis for the prediction is he can drag Manuel Torres past round 1. where he's only been once as a professional. Just one fight of his has gone past round one, and it was a 3-round split decision victory. And I really wish I could see it. And if you know where to find it, let me know. It's over in Enrique Gonzalez, I believe. But every other win of his is him steamrolling his opponents, and that carries it into the UFC here, 3 fights in or whatever he's got. Every victory is in round one, 7 by knockout, 7 by submission, and the majority of these wins come in the first half of round one. He's a quick finisher. And I suppose that's a possibility here against Ignacio Bahamondes. Ignacio Bahamondes has been submitted twice. And they were both early in his career, his first 2 losses, but they both were in round one. This guy, Matt McKean, got him out of there with a rear naked choke, and Preston Parsons armbarred him. Preston, of course, is in the UFC, and I believe he is. And that's it, though. Those are his first 2 losses. They're both by submission. Since then, though, he's only lost 3 decisions, and most of them, 2 of them were close fights. The John McDessie in his UFC debut, and this guy Salvador Becerra in Combate Americas. And that was, both were razor-thin fights, but I do think Bahamondes could have won the fight if he was able to be more of a jouster and make more of his reach. Manuel Torres probably has danger on his side. Certainly in round one, he probably has a power advantage as far as conventional strikes go. We saw him get that beautiful knockout over Nicholas Mota, and also Frank Camacho as well. A great combination with Frank pressuring him. And recently, we saw him get a submission victory over Chris Duncan earlier this year. Strangled him within 2 minutes. He's proven to be really dangerous. And I have to mention him TKOing the guy Colton England on the Contender Series, even though he may have poked him in the eye there or whatever. But the danger cannot be denied. I mean, he's got 15 victories with 14 finishes, and they're all so quick. And I think it's still a threat going into this matchup. But Bahamondes, he's proven to have a solid chin on him, and that's a chin that's held up in some grueling battles. And I trust his chin to hold up to the power of Manuel Torres. As far as Manuel Torres going through him, he would have to rip him to the mat and get it done early, I think. If he doesn't do that, Bahamondes, I trust to be the better finisher down the stretch. We've seen him get his only submission over Rong Zhu, or Zhu Rong, in round 3 with the Darce choke. Speaking of which, we saw him get a round 3 spinning wheel kick with like seconds on the clock against Roosevelt Roberts. So Bahamondes, I just trust a little more because I've seen him there. And he usually does better, thrives down the stretch. But Bahamondes can be crowded. You know, those 2 losses he has were fights where he wasn't able to dictate the kickboxing with his range, fell into the counter-striking traps of John McDessie. But his last loss was to Ludovic Klein. Ludovic Klein, who was considerably smaller than him, but was able to bully him. I think he was just sharper as a striker and as a grappler, the faster guy and stronger on the inside. And I do think Manuel Torres will have strength and physicality on the inside. But I don't know if he's going to have it past round 1. I just haven't seen it from him. Again, I'd love to see that one fight he's had that went 15 minutes. So Bahamondes, with his sophisticated striking, you know, he may not be the best jouster and make the most of his physical tools, but he's still got excellent striking. In particular, his kicks. He switches stances, throws kicks every which way, and he's generally too much for most strikers in the UFC. And I think he will shine if he's able to get this fight past round 1. But it's really just a guess because, again, Manuel Torres might have the best cardio in the fucking world. But Bahamondes, I'm picking him to win, and it's based on faith and not doubt because Bahamondes, I've seen him battle enough good fighters and prevail. Got a decision over Trey Ogden, which has gotten a lot better with age. Again, the round 3 finishes that I mentioned. And of course, recently got another head kick knockout over Christos Giagos. So I think he's definitely here to stay in the UFC. He's already proven himself. And I want to see him force Manuel Torres to answer questions. As for the bet, the money line's available right now, and it's been enough for me just to come down on the side of Ignacio Bahamondes. He's an underdog at plus 105. I feel comfortable betting on him, but it's not something I feel too confident in. It's not the biggest bet. It's just enough to ruin some parlays, shit like that, you know. But once the props do open, I'll look for Manuel Torres by submission and by submission in round 1 because, just plugging in their records, that seems like the way to go for him. As for a decision, I should mention he's going to have the hometown on his side. Again, I'm talking like this is in Mexico, but it may as well be. And he's the Mexican. Ignacio Bahamondes is Chilean. So I'm going with Ignacio Bahamondes, and I do think he could win a decision. I'm picking him to win by round 3 stoppage. But in general, I think he takes over the fight. But be aware, if it does go the distance, I'll be as much aware of the crowd as you are. And whatever. Doubting my bets if I have any. But I do have them because I played his money line, and that covers decision. And I'm taking Bahamondes. Okay, up next we have Norma Dumont versus Irene Aldana. My prediction for this fight is Norma Dumont wins a decision, and I don't have a lot of confidence in that at all. Because the fight I envision her winning is her slowing the fight down and pinning Irene Aldana, whether that's on the ground or against the cage, but making this about her physicality in tight. And I think even if she was able to fight that type of fight, those little pockets in between when Irene Aldana is breaking free and pouring it on, with the crowd firmly behind her, exaggerating all of her success, I still think I'd be worried going to the scorecards with Norma Dumont racking up a lot of control time. I think Norma is at a disadvantage on the feet. She's not bad on the feet at all. And Irene Aldana doesn't make the most of her reach, which the reach is actually really tight anyway. But Irene Aldana is 2 inches taller anyway. But still, Irene Aldana moves better, and she's got much more danger and power on her side. We've seen her get plenty of finishes in the UFC, and I'm not really talking about that axe kick on Macy Chiasson, but that's as impressive a finish as she has. Or really, the Ketlin Vieira finish is probably her best. But regardless, she's more dangerous than Norma Dumont for sure. And as far as the health of each fighter, the durability, I'd favor Irene Aldana, even though she's got 2 TKO losses as opposed to the 1 for Norma Dumont. Irene's 2 TKO losses are to Tanya Evinger, who was a beast of a wrestler, and Larissa Pacheco got her out of there in round 3. Larissa Pacheco is one of the best fighters today. So, and that loss was her first loss, probably like 10 years ago or whatever. Regardless, I think she's very durable. She's shown so in every other one of her losses. She's lost to nothing but really good fighters in the UFC. The last few years, it's really been champions. Amanda Nunes, Holly Holm, Raquel Pennington. And she showed every trait in the book in her victories over Carol Hosa earlier this year, I think. And also years back against Lucia Pudilova. They had a split decision war probably like 6 years ago. But she's shown she has a lot of great traits and she can handle it when the going gets tough. And she will throw down. Her last fight against Carol Hosa, she had her legs chopped down very early. And she battled her way back into that fight and took over it in the end. Although it wasn't like, complete dominance. It was a fucking war, but she scratched and clawed for that victory. It was maybe her most impressive victory. Although, again, I'd probably go with the knockout over Ketlin Vieira. But she's lost to nothing but good fighters, and lately she's gotten some TKOs. I mentioned the Vieira and the Macy Chiasson win. She also TKO'd Yana Santos, who recently came back and reminded everybody she's not bad. So Irene Aldana, with her kickboxing advantage and all of her traits and the crowd and whatever, she's got a lot going for her in this side, in this fight. And I do think on her side, she's got power and durability. Norma Dumont was knocked out by Megan Anderson's straight right hand. And again, Irene Aldana may not have the physicality of Megan Anderson, but when she starts throwing, her hands are incredibly dangerous. So I do think Irene is very much in this fight, certainly in the knockout battle, and very much in the points battle. But the fight I'm envisioning is Norma Dumont crowding Irene Aldana. Norma Dumont, her victories aren't as memorable, but she's still gotten plenty of them. Beat Carol Hosa, it just wasn't a war. But she beat her quietly by decision. And her most recent fight was against Germaine de Randamie, where she was able to get a nice, quiet, controlling victory over Germaine, who I thought could have posed problems for her potentially by being a longer, taller, deadlier striker. She's lost to bigger girls that she couldn't physically handle or dominate anyway. Macy Chiasson, which the fight was very close, but Macy, bigger than her considerably, and was able to uh, neutralize her here and there and get the advantage on her. And Megan Anderson was able to knock her out. She's got that extra power and whatever from being 6 foot tall, but she was also able to fend off a few takedown attempts early and maybe slow her down enough. So, yeah, Norma, she's those are her 2 losses, and Irene Aldana is taller than her and a better striker. But I also think Irene Aldana is not as physically strong as Megan Anderson or Macy Chiasson. Macy was actually getting the better of her before Irene knocked her out with that up kick, that axe kick. So I do think Norma Dumont should win by being able to win another quiet, grindy type of fight. And that is the prediction, but it's not the bet, not yet anyway. I'll have to toss a few back and find the courage to bet on her. But right now, I'm thinking about Irene Aldana, her moments of offense, and the crowd roaring behind her. And I'm sitting this one out as of now. Next up, we have Ronaldo Rodriguez taking on Ode Osborne. My prediction for this fight is Ronaldo Rodriguez wins, and I've got him winning by round 2 finish. Let's say submission, like he did last time around. I have bet on him. I don't see the props available yet, but his money line is sitting at minus 130, and that's my biggest bet so far of the money lines. I like him to win this fight. I think even though Ode Osborne has a deceptively shitty record because he's fought such better competition, I still think Ronaldo Rodriguez is the healthier fighter, the 25-year-old who's never been finished, whereas Ode Osborne, again, despite the competition, he's still been finished in the majority of his losses. And I also think in the majority of the wins from Ronaldo Rodriguez, he's shown incredible traits. Most of his finishes come down the stretch, and that includes his UFC victory over Dennis Bondar with 1 second left in round 2. And he's also shown he can handle adversity. He can handle adversity. I wish I've seen both of his losses, but I've only seen one of them. He's got 2 losses. They're both by decision. The last one was to Jerome Rivera on the Contender Series. Jerome Rivera had a cup of coffee in the UFC after that, but he's still a good fighter, and they had a tooth and nail battle. It was a unanimous decision with, I think, 2 30-27s, but those are bad scorecards. Because you could definitely argue Ronaldo should have won round 2, and you could certainly make the argument he won the whole fight. He was very competitive throughout that whole fight. But he's shown a bunch of great traits in a lot of his victories. A lot of round 3 and round 2 stoppages. Got a guillotine a few fights ago in round 2 against this guy, Jamie Londano. Even though it was a doctor stoppage, he got a round 3 stoppage in his win before coming to the UFC over Angel Rodriguez or Angel Rodriguez. That was an ankle injury, but still, after a close tooth and nail round 1, he was looking sharp in rounds 2 and 3. Even though the guy couldn't stand by the end of round 2. But Before that, he had 2 decision victories, one of which was a split decision. And that was one where he wasn't totally dominant in round 3. This guy who had much less experience, Victor Moreno, actually gave him a good battle. But it's not like Rodriguez looked like he was falling off a cliff or anything either. But he's made a believer out of me. He's been contained to Mexico, so I'm aware that while O'Day Osborne's been fighting everybody, and a bunch of high-level killers have defeated him, Ronaldo Rodriguez just doesn't have the resume to fully know where he's at. But I still think he's got so many great traits, and with O'Day Osborne's vulnerabilities, I think Ronaldo Rodriguez will find a way to take over this fight and finish him. O'Day Osborne, he's got a record of 12-7, deceptively shitty. And he does have 2 knockout losses and 4 submission losses. The knockouts are to Manuel with a flying knee and also to Tyson Nam. Both of them are fucking killers. Absolute killers, pure knockout power from both guys. And there's no shame in getting knocked out by them. Having said that, he's the only guy who's been knocked out, and it happened twice. That's me. I give some little half step this way, and then I go back the other way and take it all back. O'Day Osborne also has 4 submission losses. 2 of them recently by rear naked choke. Asu Amabayev got him out of there in round 2, and Jafel Filio got him out of there in round 1. Of course, he made his UFC debut getting guillotined by Brian Kelleher. Kelleher may have retired and may not be the most viable fighter today, but he was in his prime then, and the guillotine was his best move. So I'll give those little caveats. And then he was knee barred in 25 seconds 6-7 years ago. So there's that. But still, I feel like it's no coincidence. He's been finished in 6 of his 7 losses. I think he is a vulnerable guy despite being 32 years old. And I do think Ronaldo Rodriguez will find a way to test those vulnerabilities. O'Day Osborne's advantages are, of course, the experience. I got to go the other way with it now. I mean, that is an asset for him. He's been in there. I mean, I think they've got the same amount of fights, close to it. But O'Day Osborne's got much more high-level experience and, of course, much more UFC experience. O'Day, I think, is also a sharper athlete, especially when he's firing on all cylinders. I think O'Day's got an excellent kicking game, but I've seen Ronaldo Rodriguez handle kicking very well throughout the fights I've seen. Been able to check a lot of kicks and crowd his opponents and time them in one way or another. On the ground, O'Day Osborne, he's very submittable, but he's also got an excellent guard in particular. He's a good submission threat, and he's got some slick triangles. He's definitely a submission threat if Ronaldo Rodriguez gets lazy. But Ronaldo Rodriguez, he's been tested in a bunch of these fights. And I wish I can go into every detail I've seen in every one of these fights, but I'd be here all day. And I've already been here all day, frankly. But just know I'm picking Ronaldo Rodriguez to win. I've got him winning by round 2 stoppage. I'm not married to round 2, but I do think a stoppage is much more likely than a decision. And I'd favor submission over TKO. But I'm taking Ronaldo Rodriguez. He can throw down on the feet as well. It's not like he doesn't have power. He's got more knockouts than he does submissions. But he's got excellent cardio in particular. There are plenty of times where I've seen him and it looks like the tide's about to turn and he gets his second, third win and battles his way back. Here he's going to be stepping into the UFC. I mean, he's already got one of those wins, a nice gritty win over Dennis Bondar. But it remains to be seen if he's going to carry all these traits moving forward. But I think here against a vulnerable guy like O'Day, he's going to carry him. So round 2 stoppage is the pick. The bet is the money line right now. And of course, I'll wait for the props and see what they have to offer. Okay, next up we have Daniel Zellhuber taking on Esteban Ribovics. My prediction for this fight is Esteban Ribovics wins. I'll go with him winning by decision, even though he's not much of a decision fighter, a point fighter. He's only got 1 victory by points, and it's over Kamuela Kirk. And that was not long ago, last year. And it was a great performance from him where he showed a lot of great traits. I thought he looked really sharp into round three. His striking looked good, and he was still getting taken down, but handling it well. But he's already proven himself in his finishes to have a lot of great traits and be a reliable third round fighter. I think Esteban Ribovics proved himself on the regional scene alone by getting 4 round 3 finishes, 2 of which were over decent fighters, which I'll get to in a second. But first, let me finish the general breakdown. I think Daniel Zellhuber, if he was able to make more of his reach, he should be winning this fight. Because I think he's got 8 inches of reach over Esteban Ribovics, plus a few inches of height. And I think Daniel Zellhuber is a very sharp striker. But he's not going to be dictating the range like he should. And I do think the aggressive attacks and the combinations of Esteban Ribovics will be a factor in the striking battle. I think it's a very much a close fight, much closer than the odds suggest. I think Esteban should be favored. And I think Esteban Ribovics is also more dangerous in general. He may not have the sharper overall kicks, maybe not the sharper body kicks, but Esteban has better power, I'd say, in his hands. And of course, he got a nice head kick knockout a few months ago over Terrence McKinney, so I can't totally ignore his legs. But also, I think Esteban Ribovics is the more dangerous submission artist. In particular, he loves the Kimura. Even in fights where he doesn't win via Kimura, the Kimura can be seen. It's his go-to move defensively if you take him down, and it's his go-to move offensively if he takes you down. It's definitely a thing, and I'd say it's a weapon in this matchup. But Daniel Zellhuber could be one of those taller guys with, a stronger frame, a stronger base, where he's a tough guy to Kimura, and that could be a waste for Ribovics. I don't know. Regardless, though, I think both guys, it's tough to tell how they'll lose. Each guy's only got one loss, so you can never know for sure. But both guys have that one loss being by decision, and each fighter lost in the UFC. Trey Ogden beat Daniel Zellhuber, and Louis Rajabov beat Esteban Ribovics. I think Esteban Ribovics is able to plug himself into the Trey Ogden performance and follow that blueprint a lot more easily than Daniel Zellhuber could duplicate the success of Louis Rajabov, because he's not a fucking tank who just wants to rip you to the mat. And I favor Esteban Ribovics because I think his aggressive striking will be a factor in this fight. It won't be him losing on points comfortably to a guy that should be comfortably outstriking him with 8 inches of reach. And Daniel Zellhuber is also not the guy to rip him to the mat, which I think is the primary weakness of Ribovics. Even against Kamuel Kirk, that was only a somewhat close fight because he was controlled a lot and ripped to the mat. But Daniel Zellhuber, Esteban Ribovics, he's shown a lot of great traits, getting 4 round 3 finishes, like I mentioned. One of them was a Kimura. Actually, 2 of them are Kimuras in consecutive fights. This one against this decent guy, Juan Jose Ibanez. That was a clinch battle and a physicality battle. They were tied up for 15 minutes pretty much, with Esteban getting on top of him here and there. But they were tied up together in a grueling fight, and Esteban still pulled off a Kimura from the clinch in like the 14th minute of that fight. Even if that's against a nobody, and I guess it pretty much is. The guy turned out to be like an 11-5 fighter, an incredible record and a tough guy, but not a lot of great victories in those 11 wins. But regardless, pulling off a victory like that, even over a nobody, is impressive. He also got one of his third round finishes, his last one, over Jose Jaruz. Either way, he got a really impressive round 3 finish, which was really started on the feet, but he put him away finally on the ground. And the story of that fight, again, was the Kimura. He used the Kimura to sweep him in every round. The first 2 rounds, he swept him, got up, even threatened with an armbar once or twice from the Kimura. And the third round, he used the Kimura to get up and then put him away with an uppercut and a body shot or whatever, and then pounded him out. But that was a full showcase of his traits and his skills with the Kimura. And I think he's a reliable fighter down the stretch. And again, he showed that against Kamuela Kirk. But his knockouts, he's got 7 knockouts as opposed to just 5 submissions. And I think 5 of those 7 knockouts might add up altogether to like 2 minutes. He's got a bunch of finishes in under 30 seconds. The last one against Terrence McKinney, it was 37 seconds, close enough. But yeah, he's a dangerous guy early on. I think he's more dangerous than Daniel Zellhuber. Although Zellhuber's got sharper body kicks and the rest of it and whatever with his frame. But Esteban Ribovics, I have no reason to doubt his chin, nor do I have any reason to doubt Daniel Zellhuber. And I trust Ribovics to at least fight for my money here. And if not, be the better man, crowding the guy with the 8 inches of reach down the stretch. His one loss, again, cannot be duplicated by Daniel Zellhuber. Daniel Zellhuber, he's got a record of 15-1. He's got 10 finishes, 7 by knockout, 3 by submission. And he's got 5 decisions, 3 of which come in the UFC, I believe, which is a good look. Or, if you count his Contender Series win over Lucas Almeida, anyway. And that was one where he had to tame Lucas Almeida, and he looked good in rounds 2 and 3. But yeah, he's been a reliable decision fighter. And even though people have taken rounds from him, Lucas Almeida, Lando Venata, Francisco Prado, he's been able to figure them out and outpoint them. And he's won round 3 in every one of these fights, every single one of them. And of course, he got Yagos out of there with an anaconda in round 2. So it's not like I have a lot of doubt in any trait of Daniel Zellhuber. And his one loss to Trey Ogden was a fight that Trey Ogden's a guy that I underestimated, certainly around the time that he won that fight. And I think that's a loss that's gotten a lot better with age recently. But it was still a loss in which I think he was flustered. Ogden, who doesn't bring much flash, was able to crowd him and fluster him with his basic striking. But it was effective. And Daniel Zellhuber, that's the one fight where he didn't really look like himself. But I do think Zellhuber, there's no doubt in any real trait of his. I just think he's not a guy who's going to make the most of his reach. And his reach is substantial. I'm sure he's got coaches trying to cultivate that skill in him. But I still think here in this fight, it's a fight that can be won, and even the points battle can be won by Esteban Ribovics on the feet. Also, I think the more likely takedown artist is Ribovics, certainly. But I do think Daniel Zellhuber is physically stronger and could be tough to take down for Ribovics. Ribovics, I think if he gets caught even hanging on a Kimura against a taller, stronger guy, it could work against him. Could totally work for him here, but I could see Daniel Zellhuber just being too physically strong for Ribovics to outmuscle him in tight. But again, I think Ribovics is in this fight everywhere it goes. And I think if the fight goes everywhere and it's a grueling battle with even knockdowns and near submissions and whatever, I trust Ribovics to be there and fighting hard in round 3. So I'm taking him to outpoint Daniel Zellhuber. I'm aware Zellhuber's going to have the hometown advantage here, being the Mexican fighter. And that could be everything for all I know. It's happened in the past, but I'm still picking Ribovics. I'm tempted by his odds. I've already bet on him. He's over 2-1, and I'll wait to see if anything drops, any prop drops that's worth it. Next up, we have a fight that I broke down, a few months ago. Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes. I'm going with Brian Ortega to win this fight. I'm not so confident in it, but I do think I'd be a little more confident, to be honest, in a 5-round fight. Although it's not like I'm sure Diego Lopes has horrible conditioning. I just think Brian Ortega would have more time to turn the fight around. And if he gets Diego Lopes tired and Brian Ortega is having offense when he's tired, Brian Ortega is a potent finisher, especially in round 3. That's really where he made his bones, in round 3 before he became a championship level fighter. or a contender, I should just say. But I have to talk about the last fight. Diego Lopes was supposed to fight Brian Ortega. Ortega got sick or whatever, he wasn't feeling right, and Dan Ige stepped up like a fucking man and a half and gave a good battle for Diego, but one where it was too little too late. The guy stepping up on a few hours' notice, though, did outlast Diego Lopes, and I thought he had by far his best round in round 3. Which doesn't mean Diego Lopes has horrible cardio or whatever. It just means I'm going to bet on it. I'm going to bet on him having horrible cardio. But look, I've seen his losses as well. Diego Lopes, he's got 6 losses. He's been TKO'd twice. Actually, one of them I haven't seen, although I really wanted to, against this guy Rodrigo Praya. Happened 10 years ago and in round 2. But the other one I saw, this guy, this good fighter, Amir Alzarkayev, knocked him out in round 2. That was ground and pound that knocked him out. But it just wasn't a good look. Diego was discouraged, overwhelmed, and again, I think in the end, unconscious. Although it's tough to tell exactly what happened there. But his other losses are all by decision. He lost on the Contender Series years back to Joe Anderson Brito. It was a technical decision, but still a decision where he was largely controlled from top position. He did what he always does and threatens with every choke in the book, or every submission in the book from the bottom. But he wasn't able to get him, and the submission threat slowed down a little bit, and in the end, he was controlled. He had a fight with this guy, Nate Richardson, where I thought he looked really good there. You know, that had a lot of good moments on the feet and threatened him on the ground. It was a close enough fight, but I can't say it was the best decision. It was a 5-round split decision that he lost. And then he lost to Movsar Evloev in his UFC debut in another fight where he showed every submission in the book and looked really fucking good. On very short notice as well, I believe. So there's that. And then he lost a decision back in 2013. I'm pretty sure that fight was 6 minutes long, if that's the fight I'm thinking of, where there's some shit version of it on YouTube, but it's ruled a 15-minute split decision. Either way, whatever. May as well have been an amateur fight. And it's not like he got his ass kicked either. But he's been in the UFC since the Movsar Evloev fight, and that Evloev loss could be considered a win because of the circumstances and how he looked, threatening Evloev down to the final seconds. And since then, he's gone 4-0 with 3 finishes and the 1 decision over Dan Ige. Which, I talk about Dan Ige taking the fight on 4 hours notice and whatever. It was a pretty shitty set of circumstances for Diego Lopes as well. And it's not like Dan Ige's not some problem. He's somebody you got to give some thought to, a top-level fighter. So no matter what happened in round 3, it was a good victory for Diego Lopes. But his other wins are all round 1 destructions, every one of them in 90 seconds or thereabout. He got Sadiq Youssef out of there at UFC 300. Got Pat Sabatini out of there at UFC 295. And at UFC Fight Night, whatever the fuck, he got Gavin Tucker out of there with an armbar from the guard. So he's incredibly dangerous. He's already beaten his share of UFC fighters by danger in 90 seconds, where everybody respects the danger of Diego Lopes. But he's also shown he could fight hard for 15 minutes in defeat and in a victory. The thing is, Brian Ortega is more dangerous than anybody he's fought, and that includes Dan Ige. Brian Ortega is a very solid finisher, and, he's got 11 finishes in his 16 wins. The other 5 are by decision. But without doing the math of those 11 wins, I want to say at least half of them are in round 3, which means 6. And I do think that's probably the case. Maybe there's a few that I'm not thinking of that are round 2, and I know he got Frankie Edgar out of there in round 1, but a lot of round 3 finishes for Brian Ortega. It's been a trait of his since before he was a champion. He beat Thiago Tavares, got him out of there with a TKO from the full mount in a really exhausting fight. Then he got Diego Brandao out of there in round 3 with a triangle choke. Clay Guida with a beautiful comeback, a knee right on the button. And it's not like Clay's the easiest guy to knock out, even though he could be rocked maybe more easily than most. And Renato Moicano, after that, he got out of there with a guillotine choke. Still the only guy to tap out Renato Moicano. And that was incredible because that was a really close fight. And of course, recently he got it done against Yair Rodriguez with an arm triangle choke. He got that one decision over Chan Sung Jung in a 5-round clean victory, which still just seems like the anomaly on his record. He's gotten other decisions, but earlier in his career, that's his one real victory by decision in the UFC. And it was a 5-rounder against the Korean Zombie. It was a big surprise. His 3 losses are all to elite fighters. 2 of them are by TKO, but I still think he's never been knocked out. Max Holloway got him out of there, forced a doctor stoppage between rounds 4 and 5. Max was kicking his ass and teaching him how to box and the rest of it, but Max was still, he's still one of the best fighters to ever walk the earth. So, no shame. And Yair Rodriguez got him out of there with a shoulder injury, going for an arm bar. He pulled his arm out and injured it. So I'm assuming that's not going to happen here. Although against Diego Lopes, it probably could, to be honest. And then his other loss was to Alexander Volkanovski in that classic championship fight where Ortega gave him hell in the middle of the fight, but was largely a step behind in the rest of it. It was a good loss, really tough loss and a clean loss, but not a bad look at all for Brian Ortega. And I just think here, I'm not going to play the levels game and go, yeah, Diego isn't on the level of Max and Volkanovski and whatever. I'm going to just say that I think Brian Ortega is still a healthy fighter in his prime, and I think he's still really tough. I think he's incredibly durable, and I know his submission skills are incredible, where I'm thinking he's going to survive the danger of Diego Lopes and get by round 1. And then after that, his chances go drastically up. And again, where Dan Ige can turn the fight around but not really make you pay for it, Brian Ortega will make you pay for it. He's much more deadly than Dan Ige. Maybe not as a knockout artist, but still. If he gets you on the ground, he's fucking deadly, Ortega, in a way that nobody else really is. And he may be the only guy that can match and perhaps exceed Diego Lopes down there. Actually, don't hold me to that. I've seen the Movsar Avoya fight, but I'm really talking about like submission grappling here. And Brian Ortega is still incredible, incredibly dangerous. You don't want to go to T City with him. That's a triangle, but you definitely don't want to go to G City with him either. That's his guillotine. He's got problems for you, and my pick is Brian Ortega. Outlast Diego Lopes, slows the fight down a little bit, and then gets on top of him and puts him away in round 3. You bet your ass I'm going to bet on that because I think those are the longest odds anyway, typically a round 3 finish, but I think there's a good chance if he wins, it looks like that. But I've also bet on his money line as well, which obviously covers the decision and whatever else. It's just because he's at plus money. But really here, I'm going to sit back and wait for the props. I will bet on the finishes for Ortega down the stretch. I'll see what the finish early looks like for Lopes, even though I don't think it'll happen. But with his style, it's always a possibility. And my true hedge would be Diego Lopes winning a decision. And I think it would look exactly like the Dan Ige fight, where Diego Lopes is doing well early, too athletic for Brian Ortega to wrangle and to tame. And then even if Brian Ortega catches up to him and slows him down, he's still banked enough success early on where he gets the victory. So I'll wait for the props, but as of now, I got Brian Ortega, and I got him by round 3 finish, and I mean a fucking comeback. And in the co-main event, we have Alexa Grasso defending her title against her rival, Valentina Shevchenko. My prediction for this fight is Valentina Shevchenko wins by decision. And my confidence in this pick is non-existent. I had a lot more confidence in this same pick in their first fight. And then I made the same pick in their second fight with far less confidence. And now here, like a dumbass, I'm going for the third time with the same pick But again, there's just nothing there as far as confidence goes. The basis for the pick is I've seen Valentina have a chance at beating her twice already. I think their skills match up where Valentina could win. But I also think Valentina still maintains that big asset of physicality and strength over Alexa Grasso. They're both going to rip each other to the mat. Alexa Grasso proved she could do that against Valentina in both fights. But I still think Valentina has hit more takedowns. She's also cost herself by going for some lazy head and arm throws. But I think she's stronger, and if she mitigates those risks and that sloppiness when she gets tired, it should still carry her to winning more points and getting some sort of bullshit victory here. I don't know. I think it'll be a really close fight no matter what. I couldn't bet on anything in this fight unless they have the decision line way off. And you look, with the first fight ending via finish in round 4, maybe they will. But I think in general, I'll just be staying away from this one altogether. Let me just briefly talk about their losses. Valentina's got 4 of them, 2 of them by decision to Amanda Nunes. That is what it is. They're both really close fights, especially the second one, and that's the best fighter ever. Liz Carmouche beat her by TKO in round 2 way back when. That was a cut, and she was losing the fight. Valentina was winning. And then, of course, Alexa Grasso got her out of there in round 4. Alexa Grasso lost by decision to the Patty Cake girls from The Ultimate Fighter, Carla Esparza and Felice Herrig way back when. And her one finish loss was Tatiana Suarez, who still might be the greatest fighter on the planet. I don't know. But she's the one girl that was able to submit her. She's a fucking monster in a way that even somebody like Valentina has never been. Not saying Valentina or Alexa wouldn't beat her if they fought here, but yeah, that's a grappling monster. But their 2 fights are really what it's all about here. And I do think their first fight was going Valentina's way, kinda. I think Valentina was able to rip her to the mat and control her in rounds 2 and 3 after a close round 1, but one that I thought Alexa Grasso finished a little more strongly and took. And then in round 4, I thought it was close up until it wasn't. Valentina went for a spinning back fist or whatever, got taken down and submitted. After a good fucking 90-second battle or whatever. But she finally got submitted with Alexa, who's got a hell of a squeeze on her and was working a face crank. It wasn't like she was right under the chin. But she worked her for 90 seconds and forced a stoppage. And then in the fight number 2, I'll be honest, I thought Valentina should have won a decision, although it was really close. And Alexa Grasso gave herself a shot at a draw and whatever, and even a victory in the end by capitalizing on a head and arm throw from Valentina and getting the same spot she had in round 4 in the first fight. She had that in round 5. Went for a rear naked choke and got some good ground and pound from the back mount, but it just wasn't as big a moment as the crowd made it out to be, frankly. And I don't think she should have gotten a 10-8 round. Regardless, that was another back and forth fight. Valentina had a good amount of top control, and especially in round 3, she advanced on Alexa and almost submitted her and really worked her. Had a tight guillotine, I believe, and then took her back. But it was still a back and forth fight, and I think Alexa Grasso is going to have a slight advantage on the feet. Slight. Valentina can still win the kickboxing battle. Obviously, she's one of the best ever. But I think Alexa Grasso's hands are really fast, and that gives a lot of trouble to Valentina. Valentina's on the back foot, cocked and ready to counterstrike. And she's always going to land counterstrikes because she's so fucking fast herself. But Alexa's got incredibly fast hands. And she was able to get off on Valentina from the first round of the first fight and let her know this is not that fight that you're used to, where you're keeping Liz Carmouche at the end of your strikes for 25 minutes. That's not going to be this. And Valentina felt that pressure, and that's what forced her to make those mistakes. Spinning in round 4 and going for a sloppy takedown in round 5. And Alexa made her pay with grappling, which was what gave her the victory and the draw. But I'm still going with Valentina because she's only been finished the once. And it happens to be by Alexa Grasso, but I still trust her overall durability. I think she's still got excellent 5 round cardio. I am worried about her because she hasn't fought in a year and she's now 36. But I know she's been training and the rest of it, and she's had a lot of time to get in shape. And I think with her intelligence, she's going to be able to figure out a way to get by Alexa Grasso this time. Thought she should have had it done the second time, but it didn't work out. But all that confidence I might have just expressed in the last 30 seconds where, yeah, I think she's got it done. She's going to get it done and get it done or whatever. I'm not going to bet on shit. I'm not going to bet on it. I don't trust the money line. This is a toss-up fight, and I'm sure the decision lines will look nearly identical. Yeah, I couldn't trust anything. I think this is going to be really close. I think their skills match up where either fighter can win the striking or the grappling. So I'm hoping for a good battle. It'd be amazing if we got a finish really either way. But if not, I think we're going to get a very competitive 5 round fight, just like the last one. And I slightly favor Valentina Shevchenko. In the main event of the evening, we have Sugar Sean O'Malley defending his bantamweight title against Merab the Machine Dvalishvili. And that is how you pronounce it, Dvalishvili. And I've got Merab winning this fight. I've got him winning by decision, as you might imagine. And I have bet on him, but not his decision line. That line it has been released, and it's just not worth it. It's plus 130 as opposed to his money line, which is sitting at plus 110. And again, it covers all the bullshit. A cut, stoppage, someone stubs their toe, whatever happens. So the money line is the way to go if you're going to play Merab. For Sean O'Malley, I have played him as well, but it's him winning by knockout. His knockout lines are available. His knockout line is plus 190, but I feel like if he's going to get a knockout, it's got to happen in the first half of the fight because we're talking about Merab here. So that's what I've played. Knockouts in round 1, 2, and 3. 1 being the most. But 1 is plus 700, then plus 1,000, then plus 1,200. That's really where the value is for a Sean O'Malley knockout. And of course, if you want me to be honest, I've also played Sean O'Malley winning by decision, by submission, because I'm a fucking degenerate. What do you want from me? I just got to play Merab via knockout. Let's do that next. No, but we're talking about pennies here. But really, the pick is Merab. I've got him winning by decision. You might imagine what that looks like. I don't think he's going to have too much grappling success or even that much wrestling success. But I think he will out wrestle Sean O'Malley, certainly. And I think he will control him. If he's not controlling him on the ground, I think his pressure will kind of control him in a way. Merab may not have the overall grappling prowess of Aljamain Sterling. I thought Aljo could have gone through Sean O'Malley on the ground. Merab doesn't have that available. He doesn't have that jiu-jitsu. And he doesn't even have the overall control. He may not be able to hold him on the ground, but he will not stop. Merab has better cardio than anybody in the UFC. And even if he doesn't have the physical strength as other bantamweights or whatever, he's fucking relentless and he's strong enough. And I think he can control Sugar Sean O'Malley on the inside. Having said that, on the outside, he's at a bigger disadvantage. Sean O'Malley is a much cleaner striker. He's a much more dangerous striker. And he's got the reach and the footwork and the speed and every asset in his favor on the feet. Merab is wild. He's actually got one of his best wins being a spinning back fist knockout. And we've seen him land some other spinning back fists in the UFC. But I think his striking, he's got to keep it simple, Merab, and he's got to use it to strike his way into range because he can't play around with Sean O'Malley. He knows better than anybody because he was there watching Sean hit a perfect counter on Aljo, who took a half-stepping, weak shot, half-ass shot on him, or, approach him. He approached him and got knocked out with a beautiful counter. So, Merab, I trust his durability. He's never been knocked out. The closest anybody's ever come is Marlon Moraes. And that was a big moment. I don't want to make it like it was just some half moment. It was a big moment where he was hit with a left hook and then hit with a few more left hooks when I thought he was halfway out, but he never went out, battled back, and in the end of the round, he was hammer fisting Marlon Moraes into being a cop or whatever. Which, by the way, that's what he does now. He's a cop, and that's fucking awesome. But yeah, Merab, he handled it well there. And other than that, he's been hit a few times. Henry Cejudo staggered him, but it seems like he's got a very good chin. And I know something that helps, maybe not your chin itself, but your recovery and your overall durability is excellent cardio. And he's got that on his side. So I can't say I totally trust his durability because I am the guy who's already bet on O'Malley via knockout. But on paper, yeah, I have to trust it. Merab's only been finished once, and it was a guillotine choke from Ricky Simone in the 16th minute of a 15-minute fight. That shouldn't be much of a factor here. That shouldn't even be a loss, in my opinion, or at least not a submission loss. But Sean O'Malley is not a threat in that way. Merab's other loss in the UFC, anyway, since he's been the Merab that we know, was the Frankie Saenz. And that's something I could see Sean O'Malley doing, winning that Frankie Saenz type of fight, where Frankie Saenz was taken down a dozen times, but he kept getting up, kept trying to give answers, and in the end, made it a close enough fight for him to win a bullshit decision, in my opinion. Merab should have won the fight. Sometimes the control is just enough, and he was controlling him by taking him down. Maybe the ground control itself wasn't so much, but Merab definitely was dictating that fight. But that's it. He had two other losses before that in his first three fights to decent fighters, and they were controlling him on the ground, I know. So that was the Merab of old. But since then, Merab, he's made it to the UFC, got by those first two losses, and since then, he's on a killer streak, and he's looked incredible, dominating everybody he's fought. Even if he doesn't get finishes, the only finishes over Marlon Moraes, he's still beating so many good fighters, champions, and Petr Yan and Jose Aldo, and making it look easy. Took the life out of Jose Aldo, where Aldo didn't even really try to fight his way back into that fight. And Petr Yan, it was a 5-round domination. Sean O'Malley, he's only got one loss. It's a knockout loss to Marlon Chito Vera. His leg was compromised with a calf kick. He had drop foot or dead leg or whatever they call it, and he couldn't stand. And Chito pounced on him and kind of pushed him over. And then on the ground, it was elbows that finished him, and it was a knockout, a flash knockout or whatever. But he hit him with some powerful shots and got him out of there with ground and pound. I can't say it's a major strike against the chin of O'Malley, and even if I could, I wouldn't put much weight on it at all in this fight against Merab. But it's more a loss due to his calf giving out or his whatever happened there with the leg. Speaking of which, that's the other time he's shown a lot of vulnerability against Andre Sukumtov. Sukumtov had him on one leg in round 3, but was fighting like a bit of a dumbass and wasn't able to close the show. And I have to mention Petr Yan, I did think beat Sean O'Malley, and I rewatched that fight this week, and I thought he won the fight again. But I still think Sean O'Malley showed a lot of great traits and made that a hell of a battle. And against Merab Dvalishvili, he might need to show those same type of traits. Petr Yan was all over him. Yan, while being a lot better than Merab on the feet, which was something in that fight that O'Malley had to worry about. But at the same time, Yan is not the relentless grappler that Merab is. And if you don't believe me, go watch Merab versus Yan. But Yan still had a lot of success taking down Sean O'Malley. A lot of them were double legs, too. I think he tripped them and whatever. But a lot of them he set up with some nice strikes and then shot his way into takedowns and was able to get on top of O'Malley. And that fight wasn't long ago. I know O'Malley has been working on nothing but takedown defense. He's had Merab in his sights for a while. But I still think Merab is going to be able to get inside on him and get him down. I doubt he'll be able to control him thoroughly for one round, let alone all of them. But I think he'll be able to get him down 30 times if he needs to. So Merab is the pick. I've got him winning by decision. I don't have the most confidence in the pick, but I have bet on it, of course. I bet on him anyway. And I've also hedged with Sean O'Malley winning by knockout. So that is my assessment. I hope it's an awesome fight. And you know what? I'll just be honest. I hope Merab wins. I always give you a full objective analysis, but I do hope Merab wins this fight. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.